Okay, so the reason I brought up this webinar idea is to really talk about how to sideline narcissists in the real world. So if you look at a lot of videos online, there's people that have a grip of narcissists, or they have a grip of what's going wrong, but they just sit there and they just point out, look at how wrong that is, look how screwed up that is, look how childish that is, and basically what they are is just it's gotten down to the point now where it's just people are just a master of the obvious. And so that's not enough to actually solve the problems. So really what I'm suggesting is at the end of the day, nothing gets solved unless we can get a grip of narcissists. And that's on the personal level, because forget about getting a grip of narcissists on the big level unless you can do it personally. So, does anybody have any comments about that so far? Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start out with a story of mine, um, and I'll go through all the details of how that worked. And I would say that it's a story of mediocre success of getting rid of narcissists. And but since then, after that, I learned all my lessons, and I have become much more efficient at doing it now, having learned my lessons. But anyway, so I here's my story. It might take about 10 minutes or so, and afterwards we can talk about the various elements of that story. So my two sons were in a summer swim club, and one day a father came up to me. He has a little boy and a little girl, and he said, "Mark, do you know that I was just called into a meeting with the president, this the swim, what do you call it? The swim, not the swim coach. He's the leader of the the speed swimming director, and the water polo director. And the three of them took me aside and told me that they're kicking me and my family out of the club." And I said, "Why the heck would they do that?" And he said, "Well, they just said that I'm too negative, and they've given me warnings before, and there's many people that are also complaining, and so they said for the good of the club, they will have to kick me out and the family." So they're just giving him a formal meeting to tell him he's out. So when he came to me, he said, "I've told already how many 17 families about this already, and every family that I told said, 'Hey, that's not right. They're not allowed to do that. And I never complained about you.'" So then, after he told me that, um, I was still in the building, and there was another mother in the lobby. And after he left, I said to the mother, I said, "Hey, did you hear about what they're trying to do to this family?" And she said, "Yes, actually, I'm actually part of the board of the swim club, and we've just decided that it's really been too much with this guy, and we need to get rid of him." So I said to her, "I tell you what, if I ever hear another word about this, if I hear anything like this actually goes through, I'm going to come and sort all of you out personally. And I tell you one thing, I better not hear anything about this ever again." So then that night, I was called by the swim club, by the president. Now, the president was part of the three people that were talking to this family. And he said, "Mark, I'm hoping you can support us on this, because, he really is poisonous, and, it's just really bad for the club." And I said to him, "Perry, you know, you never cross a river unless you know where the dangerous fish are, because you could get bitten. So what you do is you prick your finger and you put blood in the water, because all of those poisonous fish who depend on camouflage to survive, they will be driven mad by the smell of blood, and they will come to the surface where you can see them. And I said, Perry, there's blood in the water and I'm watching. And it wasn't too long after that where the father came back to me and he said they've decided that to change their minds and that they are going to apologize to him. So I said, wow. Now, I want to intercede on one point here is that when I told that mother, when I recognized she was part of the board, and I said to her, this goes forward over my dead body, that type of thing, I remember feeling a flash of fear. Like, what am I getting myself into? But the minute I felt that fear, I said to myself, don't be some type of ridiculous coward. You, and I called myself a name, like, you silly coward. And then I carried on. So anyway, flash forward, it turns out that the president went and apologized to him. Oh, and it turned out that after they called me, they called another family and asked them for support, and they said, absolutely no way. So then they realized everything was over. Now, there's 100 families in this club. But anyway, so they apologized to him, and then the swim director came up and apologized to him, then immediately criticized him. And then the water polo director never, ever went and apologized to him. So what happened after that is that my alarm bells were ringing because I realized that we had uncovered a nest of pathological narcissists. And those three people had become so emboldened in their control of the board that they suddenly just became really brave. And they just lost all of their inhibitions and they just started being the bullies that they crave to be, that they always have to hide from being. By the way, a lot of the stuff I'm talking about, a lot of these things I'm saying are very common in all narcissist um, interactions. So we can pick up on these things and apply them to almost everything. Sometimes even the same sentences they use. But anyway, so at this point, I realized why the club was going down in membership and also why people were not staying as long is because of these narcissists had taken over, but you didn't quite notice, but people could kind of smell it in the air and the club was going down. Now, what happened is that I started to become very suspicious and I started going after these guys. Not so much physically or anything like that, but I was questioning them openly because I realized who these people truly were. And I was like a dog with a bone. I was not going to let it go. I was not going to just go silently into the night. Because basically what had happened, that family, I had taken them, put them behind myself and say, you're dealing with me now. So now they looked at me as the danger. And I was especially dangerous to them because they could tell that I had no fear. So what they did is they tried to get rid of me. They forgot about that other family and they turned their guns on me. So they were trying to threaten me with getting me kicked out, and that didn't work. They were trying to backstab me with the rest of the club. That didn't work. They tried to, even now they went after my kids, right? So they were threatening to kick my kids out. So what's happening at this point now is that they see danger in me. They see walking death. And now they are completely panicking now. They have lost all their inhibitions. This goes back to what I'm saying about when the poisonous fish smell blood, they lose all their inhibitions and they rise to the surface. So they're going after me hell bent for leather, and I was just by myself. But the key here is that nothing they did ever made me react. No fear, no shame, no guilt, no backstabbing, no social rejecting. Nothing even made me twitch, which made them really afraid, like really scared, because they're not used to any people just not reacting. So then when they started coming after my kids, That's when they even got the coach involved. They got all sorts of people involved. And then after that, that's when I had two parents come to help me. Like they were sitting on the sidelines, but they just say, that is it. So whenever I had a meeting with these guys, those two parents showed up and just made a mess of the entire thing they were trying to do. So I could go on with more details, but the basic upshot is that two of those, the three of them, got chased out of the club eventually, including the president, who was threatened with getting fired from his bank job by his boss if he did not immediately quit the swim club. So what happened is by standing up to them, only 3 out of 100 people, they were demolished, driven off. And then after that, though, we had about elections about that time, and they brought in their choice of a new president who happened to be another narcissist. So that narcissistic president now, he had no support because the real narcissists all vacated the club and left him alone. And the last thing I heard is that this narcissist president, all the moms ganged up on him in a fury because of how retarded he was, and he quit and left. So next thing you know, all the membership of the swim club started just going up all on its own. So that is my story of how I have driven out narcissists. And that was basically my first shot at it. So I can just see so many mistakes that I made, so many places that I was holding back. But at the end of the day, it worked. If I had to do that again, it would take like 3 days instead of 3 months. So that's my story. Does anybody have any questions about that so far? Because the next thing I'd like to do is I'd like to talk about, like, pick this whole story apart to explain what happens with narcissists. But you may have stories of your own that relate to that. So does anybody have anything to add or questions?
Well, I have a question.
Yeah,
I was wondering, is that like a private swim club? Is that a public swim club?
a private club, a private summer swim club.
And these narcissists, they were just didn't like certain people. What did they want? Like they just wanted to get rid of certain people they didn't like, or did they want something out of people?
Right. So when they interviewed this man, they told him people just don't like you. And he said, "Well, who doesn't like me?" And he says, "Well," they said, "that's confidential." And then he said, "Well, how many are there?" And they said, "That's confidential." And then he said, "Well, approximately what percentage of the whole club are complaining about me?" And they said, "A lot." Now, they just made that up totally. The reason they wanted to get rid of him is because he was a decent stand up, emotionally mature guy, and he was making noises in the club that he was on to them, and he was recognizing their bizarre poisonous behavior. So he was aware, he was awake, and he was not afraid of them. That's why they had to get rid of him, because he was not only awake to their behavior, he was starting to become verbal about it. This is why they had to get rid of him. And they just made up a story that he was poisonous. And they also made up a story about how many people wanted him out.
Can you describe the poisonous behavior?
Oh, well, some of the things that I heard about later was that the water polo the water polo parent, who was like the director, she was on deck drunk. And he was openly mentioning that. And the president himself was so unfriendly that he was complaining openly about how the president doesn't talk to anybody except sit in his little clique. And he also mentioned something about that swim director, um, but I don't remember what he said about him exactly. But The key is he wasn't holding back, he wasn't afraid, and he wasn't keeping silent. The problem with his parent, though, is that he doesn't know anything about narcissism consciously. His instincts are dead on correct, but he just didn't have the tools.
So you're going to give us a scenario of somebody being a narcissist, and then what you will do about it?
Right. So, what you can do is you can compare that story to any interactions that you may have had. But the main point of what I'm trying to get across here is that there's no such thing for an adult to see a narcissist and then just not do anything about it. Narcissists are 3-year-olds in adults' bodies, but they're very destructive. They're like an angry toddler who weighs 200 pounds. They will throw you through a plate glass window unless you get a bloody grip of them, right? So it's not enough to see a narcissist and say, hey, I don't deal with poisonous people. Adults protect society, and what they do is they go and take narcissists down. That is, they make sure that they have none of their poisonous effect on society will go forward. So that explains what happened with the swim club. Now, they weren't attacking me. I could have stood back and I could have kept out of it and just been disgusted, because everybody else in that club, the other 99 families, even if he told many of them, but most of them knew anyway, they all just stood back and just let it happen to an innocent family. Well, that's not how things are ever going to be solved. What I'm suggesting is that if you don't have the skills to not only see the narcissist, but take the next step and destroy their credibility and sideline them and make sure that they have no ability to poison society, then that's something that I'm suggesting that you want to work on. Now, one of the things I mentioned was I did have a flash of fear when I committed myself to saying to this parent, this is going to happen over my dead body, and I'm going to sort this out myself if I have to. But the key is that I recognize that fear of what I was getting myself into as being childish. Okay? It was fear, but I categorized it as a non-credible emotion. And I ignored it and I went ahead. Now, of course, narcissists don't have any boundaries, so they are kind of scary. They'll do things that no other normal person would do. The tricks they'll pull, the backstabbing they'll do, all of that. But still, I refused to allow myself to be afraid of 3-year-olds. So even if even if I am showing you all the steps on how to go through to sideline narcissists, the narcissists are not the problem, because their behavior, not only they're not the behavior, their behavior is so predictable that they're easy meat for us. They're just meat on the plate. They all do exactly the same things. If anybody's predictable, you can get rid of them, because you can anticipate everything they're going to do. The only problem is with us. We are the ones who are somehow allowing our fear to stop us from getting a grip of 3-year-olds in adults' bodies. Conversely, if we do have these skills and we work on them until we get really good at it, that is the root of the problem, and that is a solution to the problem. Because since then, I have run narcissists out of freedom groups, and it takes me about 15 minutes. I'm absolutely ruthless. And they run screaming out of the room with their voices echoing off the halls. So all I can say is it takes a little bit of practice, but you get good at it really fast because they are, again, so unbelievably predictable. So, have any of you have any stories about where you have seen a narcissist, watch them in action, but you didn't stop them? Because I have lots of those stories myself. But that's where we start.
Well,
Anybody? Yeah, go ahead.
yeah. I just had some thoughts on what you're saying because it does make sense. I
Yeah.
mean, I do practice Buddhism, so my mindset is like from that perspective, and there's always a dance, you know, for every narcissist out there, there is the equal match of the victim that falls into the narcissist's net, if you like, the trap,
Yeah.
you know, and so we co-create everything. It's like a dance. So every time something, you know, they have a role in a way. So like yourself, you felt that fear when you confronted them, and you grew. You know, you made an inner growth, and you learned not to, you know, to look beyond your reaction, and you learn to respond. So in a way, you're totally right to see it that way, that they are the victims in a way, but they're an expedient for us to grow. So a lot of people don't challenge them because it's that nature of being bullied, you know, bullying and bullied. There's a bully and the bullied. So there's a kind of unconscious dance there. So you're right that the only way to stop this game is, well, there are many ways, but you know, if it starts from us, well, everything starts from us. So your response was really the right thing to do. I mean, I'm sure that there's a lot of people who personally I have a lot of experience with, you know, in personal lives, like you know, children at school get bullied, and usually the bully is the, you know, tends to be the narcissist. So sometimes when it gets when you get confronted by a narcissist as a child, that's, unless you grow, you know, when you're an adult, unless you work on yourself, it's very difficult to break that spell, if you like.
Yeah, so I think that's fantastic what you said there. So one of the elements of what you said was kind of repeating what I was also trying to bring up, is that forget about criticizing the narcissist. Narcissists are narcissists. They're 3-year-olds in adults' bodies, and they all behave exactly the same way. The problem is us. How the hell can a 3-year-old in an adult's body do what they're doing, and we stand by and let it happen?
Because whereas, you know, if we let it happen, it's because we are, both sides are locked into that trauma. So we are the child. And actually, I work with archetypes. So the nature child, the child archetype has, you know, there's elements of that archetype here, in the fear of confronting and, you know, being betrayed. And so we have to look, you know, we can only change ourselves. We can't change the other. Because in a way, you know, it's not really a problem. It's our responsibility. You know, there's no problem. If we zoom out and we see the bigger picture, we're here to learn. From my perspective, we're here to learn in this life. And so anyone who's giving you a hard time, if it lands on your lap, yes, you've attracted it because of your unconscious behavior. So at every chance, at every conflict with, you know, such as these ones with narcissistic people, it's just it's an opportunity for us to grow. Yeah. And so it takes looking at our own child
Yep. In
Yeah.
fact, I talked to a youth, a grade 10, and he told me that he, in grade 10 in a high school here, they were forcing the kids to not go into the gym class unless they had put a pride flag on their shirt.
Oh,
They
that's
were denying them access to the gym. So
yeah.
he said that he told his teacher, F you, and he just came home.
Yeah.
And now he's decided to stay out of school for the whole month,
Mm,
which is school is over now anyway.
yeah.
So I talked to him and I said to him kind of what you said.
Mhm.
And I told him, why is this pride thing using you?
Yeah.
You use the pride thing
Mm,
because as you need to grow, you need hard things to grow from to escape childhood. And you'll never escape childhood without hard things to push you. So
mm.
take the pride thing and use it for your advantage to push yourself and make you grow your inner significance.
Yeah, but I guess if it's what is it, a teenager, then it's important to know what's right and wrong. So the FU was, in a way, was a natural reaction and quite healthy.
I don't know if
Then
he actually said those words, but he basically
yeah,
told his teacher off. And then he went and wrote up on the school website a whole diatribe of how wicked and crazy these people are.
good,
So
good.
he just lost it. Plus, he has a younger sibling in elementary school who he's really worried about.
Mm.
So actually, we're planning on having a webinar together with that boy and me, and
Hmm.
we're going to set it up and see if we can do it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So
It,
thanks for that.
it's a matter of actually, yeah, I think with young people, supporting them by giving them feedback and say, yeah, you did the right thing, and let me tell you something more. The next level learning. But
Yeah.
it's really about standing up for the wrong thing. Standing up for the right thing and not taking that nonsense. So
Yeah.
good. Yeah.
So we're going to have a philosophical chat, and it's not necessarily going to be this is wrong, that's wrong, this is stupid, these people are crazy. It's going to be really, well, he said when I talked to him, he said it was inspiring. So we're going to talk about more about this inspiring philosophy that I talked to him about
Good.
and see if that spreads among youth.
That's good. They
Yeah.
need that. They need that forum. They do.
Yeah.
These kids. Yeah.
Yeah. So anybody else have any stories about confronting narcissists, or if you fail to confront them? Because if you look at my story that I just told you about the swim club, I want you to imagine yourself in that situation, hearing the same things I did, and imagine what you would do whether you could or not. And by the way, I have read a story about a woman who was like this, and she did not hesitate to stand up to narcissists, where to the point in where she lived, people would come to her to ask her to stand up to narcissists for them because she had the skills and they didn't, including the men. There were men coming to her asking her to stand up to narcissists for them.
Yeah, I have some things to say.
Yeah.
So, firstly, I'm not making the connection totally between the story that you just said about the young boy at school and somebody with the pride flag, because, narcissism is a very big diagnosis. It is a personality disorder that has to have at least 10 characteristics to qualify, 10 to 14, and it is a spectrum. So just because somebody is myopic and intimidating and pushing an agenda doesn't necessarily mean they're narcissistic. That's the first thing I wanted to say. The
Okay.
second thing I want to say is I caution the language being used because it can go into victim shaming quite quickly. And anybody who has suffered from narcissistic abuse and you're telling them it's their problem, they need to stand up to them, I feel is misguided, because there are plenty of incredibly violent, malevolent narcissists, and that is precisely what you would never tell them to do in front of them. You have to gray rock, you have to not engage, you have to find safety. So I'm just wondering, what's the spectrum that you're talking about here? What's what's your background, Mark? Where is this coming from? Where have you been reading? Are there any people that you get your information from?
Well, what I'm suggesting is that narcissism can be just people behaving with a narcissistic manner.
But that's
So,
incorrect, right? So
so just
if you're
no, no.
calling someone a
Let
narcissist,
me
then
finish.
that's not
Let me
called, like,
finish. Let
they
me
can
finish.
have narcissistic traits,
Let me
but
finish. Let me
not a
finish.
narcissist.
Let me finish.
I just want you to be clear.
So I'm trying to be clear, but I can't be clear unless I can actually say a sentence.
You can say a sentence. You said the whole sentence.
All right. So narcissists can just describe people behaving in a narcissistic manner where they are, unempathetic, bullying, or just kind of immature. But when it comes to pathological narcissists, that's an entirely different story. So narcissism can be on a spectrum, but when you're talking about a pathological narcissist, you're talking about a 3-year-old stuck inside an adult's body. And that's what pathological means. It's like permanent. So those people are highly unlike regular people.
Mm.
But not only are they highly unlike regular people, they are fantastically similar in their behaviors. So going after immature people is not the problem. That's just a personal thing. You can do that on, but I'm talking about narcissistic people who are having an incredibly poisonous effect on their surroundings.
Yeah.
And the key is, it doesn't matter unless you can actually go in there and stop them.
Yeah, I hear two things that you're saying. I hear that, if somebody just has qualities or traits, it's a pretty heavy-handed sentence to say they're a narcissist. Most of us have narcissistic qualities and traits. So, I think maybe for the purpose of maybe your focus, perhaps it's talking about the powers that shouldn't be. It's talking about the inverted power dynamics that are out there and how we can have sovereignty and accountability within those power structures. That tracks for me. I just think, there should be some care and consideration when you're talking about narcissistic abuse, because we don't know who's going to listen to this. And somebody could be in a relationship with a narcissist, and the last thing you want to do is confront that narcissist unless you have safety and you have a whole strategy that will keep you safe and protected.
Right. So this thing that I'm giving is for adults. Okay? So what it means is somebody who is ready to go outside their comfort zone and do what's necessary for their society. So of course there are people who are just too blasted. They're like clubbed like a baby seal. They're still in the midst of trauma. And
Mm.
there's no way they're going to be ready for this. And also, speaking to adults, I can tell an adult, don't blame anybody else. Just focus on what your weakness is. And an adult can handle that easily. So this message is only for adults.
Well, I would wager to say it's only for emotionally mature adults, because I know a lot of adults who have no understanding to have any kind of accountability whatsoever, but they're bona fide adults.
Yeah, that's what I mean when I say adults.
Okay.
Emotionally mature adults. Now, I think it's just helpful to kind of segue a little bit here when it comes to defining what emotional maturity is. So this is not what this is about, but it could be helpful. And so what I'll do is I'll go back to my story about when I decided that nothing was going to happen to that family and I was going to put them behind me and deal with the situation myself. So I felt a flash of fear. And I was like, wow, where did that fear come from? But I decided that is not credible fear. And I decided to ignore it. And it doesn't matter how overwhelming the fear was, it wasn't credible and not to be paid attention to. So, emotional maturity does not mean a lack of childish impulses. Everybody has childish impulses. Emotional maturity is nothing more than the ability to categorize between credible and non-credible emotions. So that's a whole other story. But I'm saying that to help people get a grip of what's going on, to help you move forward. Okay, so I busted that whole pathological narcissistic mess of snakes apart. But I'm not going to tell you I didn't have fear.
I have
But
some questions
yeah,
when you're done.
yeah, I'm done.
Credible and non-credible emotions
Yeah,
would have probably a lot to do with whether your healthy boundaries are being violated or not. Like, you could not be being your healthy boundaries, and this is something that we learn too as adults, is to place healthy boundaries and then be able to enforce them. But the problem comes with, let's say for the swim club, was there a membership agreement? Were there already some healthy boundaries in place? The claim, like healthy boundaries, whose healthy boundaries were being violated? If there's a claim that a healthy boundary was being violated, did anyone prove up the claim? Like, when I talk about the legal part, if somebody makes a claim of, say, a boundary being violated, then they need to prove up the claim.
yeah. So I think I know what you're talking about. So in the bylaws of the club, it is possible to kick a family out or even an individual swimmer for bad behavior. But in the bylaws, you have to have like 75% of the club show up and vote and agree. So the fact that three of the board could individually take him in and kick him out is completely wrong and against all the rules. But the thing is, when you're dealing with narcissists, they don't give a damn about rules. If they think they can get away with it, rules are for you, not for them. So to get stuck on rules is not in the presence of pathological narcissists.
If I started a private member association and I had certain rules, like you can't be a government agent trying to entrap, or there's an agreement. There's an
Yeah,
agreement in a private member association,
yeah,
and then somebody ends up there. They don't live up to the agreement.
yeah,
Then to me, that's them violating my healthy boundary, and that I had actually had in writing for them. Now you're saying that they didn't do it according to their bylaws. They just got a few people and just kicked them out.
yeah.
So it seems to me that the bylaws would be pointed to more than anything. But I know you're probably going into a conversation, but I'm still not clear on you're saying the signs of the narcissist, like the signs, they're regular. Could you describe the signs a little bit more, and also how to sideline them?
Right. So I think we're going to have to do further webinars if people are interested in getting into more details about the actual skills. And actually, I imagine further webinars where you actually go out and you try it. And then you come back and describe your experience. Or you get enough motivation and knowledge and logic to be able to go and attempt it yourself. Just like I did, where I just went and did it once. And that just whet my appetite for more because I got much better at it. So, but an example of narcissists, how they are so similar. Early in the pandemic, when they were forcing injections on people, um, there was a story about a young woman in university in like a Toronto, in a Ontario university, and she. Oh no! Wait a second. What was that about? Oh, I know what it was. She was giving a lecture. She was a teacher assistant. She was giving a lecture to her university class, and it had something to do with. But anyway, she mentioned Jordan Peterson, and the executive came after her, and they brought her into the room by herself. And there were several of the university executive there, and they said, "You are a poisonous influence. We have to get rid of you." And she says, "Why?" They said, "Because many people are complaining about you." And she said, "Who complained about me?" And they said, "That's private." And then she said, "Well, what number?" And they said, "We can't say that, that's private." And then she said, "Well, approximately how many want me out?" And they said, "Many." So when I heard that, that was verbatim the exact same thing that happened in the swim club to this family, to this father. They're totally separate. No communication between them. But narcissists are so similar, they'll even use the same words, like they went to the same school to learn narcissism. So that's my example of the unbelievable level of predictability with narcissists. There's a whole list. There's huge amounts of them. There's lists of them. I mean, I've talked to a father who was divorcing his wife, and I knew the wife on sight. But years later, I met up with him and I told him, "Does she do this? Does she do this? Does she do this? Does she do this? Does she do that?" And he stood there with tears rolling down his eyes when I explained to him that he's dealing with a pathological narcissist. And he said, "If you had told me this 3 years ago, do you know how much pain you would have saved me?" And he basically thought that I had a camera in his kitchen, because how could I possibly know all of this about his wife? I mean, you tap into that predictability, it's unbelievable. But the other thing to say is that here's what's interesting is that if you can handle a narcissist at the personal level, then that's how we handle narcissists at the big level. Forget about handling them at the big level if you can't even do it in person. That's why I'm promoting people get out there and learn how to do this on your own. Because for one thing, if you manage to just put your foot in that water, and especially if you're successful, you will never be more proud of yourself. I mean, some of it's shocking. Some of the truths are shocking for you to face up to. But once you get in there, man, the personal growth is astonishing. And also, I think somebody else mentioned at the beginning, I forget who it was who said it. This is all about personal growth. Forget about the narcissist. Don't criticize the narcissist. Just look at your performance and ask yourself, how am I doing? Where are my weaknesses? Did I let fear overcome me? Next time, I'm going to get a grip of that. And you just get better and better at it, but there's no criticizing the narcissist. That is the most useless thing possible. It's like criticizing a 3-year-old for being a 3-year-old. It's useless. Anyway, that's that. Hopefully, that's at least a partial answer.
I'm having a thing with the recognizing. My understanding of a narcissist is someone who is somehow crosses your healthy boundaries to exploit your energies, your time, your resources.
Yeah.
It seems like they want to exploit something out of you.
Yeah.
And that's where I'm seeing a narcissist, is they can have every strategy in the book to get what they want from you. So that's how I see myself recognizing a narcissist, is they're trying to get something out of me in
Yeah.
a way without actually asking, or well, they might ask, or but more through manipulation, trying to guilt me or scare me, or
Yeah.
however, without being just upfront and saying, may I have this from you, and that you get a chance to either say yes or no.
Yeah. So the mentality to take, and right now you're probably not going to be able to absorb it, but if you were to skip all the way to the end when you are superb at doing this, I'll tell you what your mentality is going to be. This is a 3-year-old. It is impossible for them to manipulate me in the least. And if they can, I'm an idiot. It's my fault. It's my weakness. And as I interacted with them, I can now, because I'm studying it, I can now see where my weakness was. Now, I'm not expecting you to absorb that right now. But if you can keep that image in your head when you're dealing with a narcissist, to say it's impossible that a narcissist could get over anything on me other than I'm self-delusional. So where's that self-delusion? Or a narcissist can get it over on me because they're frightening me. But the only reason they're frightening me is because I don't know how to categorize between a real emotion and a non-credible emotion. So you work on that. Use narcissists. Narcissists do not use you. You use narcissists. Now that's maybe a bit hard to absorb right now, but that is the end goal. And that will be the end result. Even if you can't, relate to it right now, that's something to keep in your head. You use narcissists, not the other way around. I'm just going to look at some of the notes here, if I possibly can. Here we go. Okay. Right. So, what I see in the notes is some of it is talking about what narcissists are like and how disturbing they are. But we're not going to go there. I mean, that's how you start. You recognize that there's a problem. But it is so much more fun, so much more enervating, and there's so much personal growth potential for you to learn how to sideline narcissists. So I'm suggesting that's your only focus. So if you're going to say he scares me, or she scares me, or she intimidates me, that real message is, why am I so easily intimidated by a 3-year-old? That makes no sense. I'm suggesting the mindset that will help you. Now, one of the things people are going, I don't know if I can have that much bravery to do that. Well, I'm saying to you, you don't need more bravery. Because if you recognize the situation as being harmless, you don't need to be more brave. I'm suggesting a upgrade to your worldview to more match what reality is really like. Now, does anybody have any concerns about what I'm saying? Or do you feel it might be too much for you? Or, because remember, this is just an introduction just to lay out the land.
What I'm thinking is, I'm trying to find, with my description of what a narcissist is, somebody who is being kicked out of a private club. How, and so the 3 people kicking them out,
Yeah.
how are they exploiting the energies or the resources or the time of those the people they're saying are difficult? Or are those people they're saying difficult exploiting time from people? Is it making them spend more time? Like, this is the discernment, like whose boundaries are being crossed. That's, I think, the first discernment that needs to be done before we determine who's exploiting who.
Right. Okay. No, that's a good question. So using the swim club example as how to determine whether you're talking about pathological narcissist people. For one, they totally ignoring the rules. Rules mean nothing to them. Rules are only for you, the schmucks. That's one thing you can take from this. The next one is a complete lack of empathy. This parent and his children were in the club for like 5 or 6 years, as long as I had been. Their kids basically grew up in the swim club. They had all sorts of friends in the swim club, and they were just going to kick them out without a shred of empathy for them. That's number two. Outrageous lack of empathy. Um, Number three, it wasn't just those three narcissists that were causing the problem. These three narcissists had hypnotized the entire board to act just like them. So the whole board became bullies like them. The whole board lacked empathy like they did. Now, the rest of the board are not narcissists. They're cowards. They're easily manipulated schmucks, cowards with low emotional maturity and low morality and low, lack of moral fiber. So that mom that I talked to that said, "Hey, did you hear about they're going to kick out that father?" I talked to her because I thought she was really nice. She was a spectacular lady. And yet, her being on the board, she just threw out all of her common sense and just did whatever those poisonous narcissists were doing because she's a coward and is unable to stand up for herself. So instead of even saying, "Hey, I'm backing out of this," she went full bore supporting them for her own safety. Now, I had other parents come to me after the fact or while I was doing it, and they came up to me. Two of the parents said exactly the same thing. Mark, I'm really glad that you're going after that board to make things better. But I would never do that because I would never want anything to come down on my kids. Right? So that's another thing that you see around a narcissist is that the normal people become slavish, drooling retards and nothing like their real selves. And so that way, the whole board is with these narcissists. And in fact, that's why the narcissists had so much courage. That's why they lost their camouflage, because they figured everyone is listening to every word they say. Nobody has the courage to stand up to them. Everything they do, no matter how morally challenged, nobody questions them. So they thought we got it in the bag. And then they launched. Except they launched right into Mark, which was walking death to narcissists. That was their big mistake. And the other two parents that came and helped me once things became so outrageous they couldn't even ignore it anymore. So that's my answer about how can you tell what if you're dealing with pathological narcissists.
So that would include the people that they can sway, who are lemmings.
Yes, I just watched a video about what is evil. And it was a book that a guy wrote discussing what evil is, and his argument was that evil are not the pathological narcissists or the sociopaths or the psychopaths, because they totally can't help who they are. He said the true evil in the world are those people who are normal and have a conscience, but still let that parent get kicked out with his family and don't do anything. That's the root of true evil. I'm not saying I agree with it, but that was the gist of what he was saying. So these other parents were helping to attack me. And they loathed me because guess why? They were told to loathe me. So they just did whatever they were told by these horrific narcissists. They didn't question it. I mean, I even had one mom who was against me, wasn't standing up for me. She was part of the board. But later on at a swim meet, she came up to me on the quiet and she said, "We're still friends, right?" Because she and I got along fantastically, normally. But here she is on the quiet saying, "I'm not really with these guys. These guys scare me, but we're still friends, right?" But she said that so that nobody else could possibly hear it. You get it? You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, so they got their 75% by people just being afraid of them.
Exactly. Does that sound familiar on the global scale right now?
Yep.
The description of my swim club, isn't that exactly the same thing that's happening at the global scale with 8 million people? The percentages, the behavior, the predictability, the wickedness, the lack of empathy, the slavish, what do you call them, flying monkeys. It's exactly the same thing on the personal level as it is on the global level. So forget about the global level unless you can do it on the personal level. But if you can, you are worth 10,000 people.
It seems like on the global level, they also have these bylaws backing them, and they can technically, to some degree, like presume certain things that were under the bylaws until we until we correct them on that, and we know what we're talking about. I don't know where I was going with that, but oh yeah, it was more like I'm back to the bylaws of the. Yeah, technically, I guess they did get a whole bunch of people. They did get their 75%. Because I was wondering if the bylaws, if there's any remedy there, just like there's remedy for us as we learn law, we can find remedy. So again, it's us. We need to learn these things for the remedy.
So there is no remedy around narcissists when it comes to rules and laws. Because if they form a power block, every single time rules go out the window, the rules apply to you, they will ignore them if they're inconvenient, but they'll apply them to you if they're convenient. That's what those people did in the swim club. Okay? They did all of that. So if I were to criticize my performance, the reason it took 3 months for the club to do a turnaround by the time the last of them had been chased out is that I waited for new elections, which, by the way, they rigged. And I waited for things to be done the proper way. I was following the rules. If I had to go through the exact same thing again, the biggest thing that I would change is that I would completely ignore the rules. I would attack the three of them, and I would say, all three of you get out right now. Apologies notwithstanding, you're leaving the board, if not the club. And they would say, but that's not how the rules are done. I said, you've ignored the rules, so they don't apply to you. Get out. And I can tell you, it would have taken about a week for them to be gone, not 3 months. So I have taken those lessons and I apply them in the future. And again, I may seem like a big physically imposing man, but I'm telling you, I was reading about a woman that does the same thing. So what I'm hoping to leave you with after this webinar is for you to think about that swim club situation. And it was successful. And then ask yourself, what would you do if you were one of the 100 people watching an innocent family being bullied? You know damn well they're being bullied. You know how poisonous these people are. What would you do? That's a question. Because the more you think about it, if you're ever in that situation, if you clearly are listening to what I'm saying, the problem you're going to run into is that you would feel disgraced if you didn't do anything. It would impact your inner significance to sit there and watch yourself being a spectator while other people are being bullied. So don't worry about if you can't do it. If you're pretty sure you can't do it, never mind. Just think about that scenario. Would you be that 1 out of 100 to wade in there, ignore any fear you have, and just get to work? Anybody have any comments about that?
Did you kind of bully them out?
No. I'll tell you. You guys want to hear another story? I'll show you how to destroy a narcissist. You ready? So this is my improved technique. So hopefully you still got time to hear this, but it's a short story, and I'll tell you how I did this recently, like less than 3 months ago. So narcissists are like cold-blooded lizards that need to be in the spotlight for warmth. If you move the spotlight, the narcissist will get up and move to where the spotlight is. Okay? That's just how they all are. So once you know that, if I were to challenge you and say, look, in that room there's 100 people, and I've put 3 guaranteed pathological narcissists in that room. The rest of the people are all types. Your challenge is, by the process of elimination, to filter out people until you leave the 3 people that you think are narcissists after you talk to each of them. 99 times out of 100, I bet that those 3 narcissists will be the first ones that you filter out. Not you maybe, but most people. Okay? So in other words, they're that good at being impressive and hiding. However, if you understand what's at the root of narcissists, it could take you 3 months, a year to uncover these narcissists. And by that time, they've done so much damage. If you want to find out who the narcissists are, remember this idea about the spotlight. So speaking metaphorically, what you would do is you would go into that room, you'd find out where the spotlight is, you would grab the spotlight, and then you would swing the spotlight to another part of the room. And you'll notice some people get up and move over to where the spotlight is. And then you swing it back to another part of the room and watch these people moving back and forth across and across, looking for that spotlight. Normally, these people are used to the spotlight moving, and then they move over to it and they bask again. But what they're not used to is somebody deliberately, with intention, moving the spotlight left and right, left and right, left and right, putting the focus away from them and onto other people. They will lose their minds. And also, when you watch this happening out of the crowd of 100 people, you'll see the same 3 people getting up and moving back and forth to the spotlight. This is how you can find out narcissists within a couple minutes instead of a year. So swing that spotlight back and forth, find out who they are. Then what's going to happen is they're going to get really irritated. They're going to get sweaty. They're going to get frustrated because they're not used to having to work so hard. And then at some point, they're going to realize that it's you on the spotlight. They're going to realize, oh, you're the one causing all of this. And then they're going to attack you. That's what you want. You want them to turn their sights on you and attack. If you're ready for it, if you're at that level, they will attack you just like you want them to, and in their attack, they will expose themselves for who they are. If you want a real-life example of this, think of the trucker convoy to Ottawa. Once a spotlight goes off of them, they will attack the people on the spotlight. That's how you know who they are. But the thing is, it's not just a matter of knowing who they are. When they attack you, they will go full retard. They will, like I said, those poisonous fish will lose all of their inhibitions when they smell blood. And they will expose themselves in their lunacy and their childishness and their immaturity and their lack of wisdom. And what will happen is you will expose the narcissist to those other 97 people who will then look at them and realize that they're not credible. That's how you run narcissists out. You don't personally run them out. You set up the situation so that they lose their credibility with everybody and then they have to leave, which is exactly what happened with the swim club.
It's interesting. Move the spotlight.
That's right. So somebody asked me, what did you mean by moving the spotlight? Did you bring the spotlight to yourself? I said, no. What I did is I kept saying, excuse me, no, I would like to hear this person. Let me just stop talking for a moment. I want to hear this person. And then I would say, no, 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 stop. I want to hear this person now. So I forced the spotlight to never be on him and to be only on the other people. And he lost his friggin' mind. He said, I don't like you. He said, you're a bad man. And each time he's trying the shaming, he's trying the social rejection, he's trying the embarrassment, he's trying the threat. And the whole time he's doing it, I'm going, gotcha, bitch. And then finally, because I didn't react at all, he suddenly became overwhelmed in fear because he realized that he's in the presence of death itself. And then he challenged me to a kickboxing match outside. And I didn't react at all. And the lady in charge of the group just stood up and said, you get out. I've had it with you. None of this crap. I'm not having this threatening. And they kicked him out of the group. And then they said to me, and then I explained to them how I had done all this on purpose. And they said to me, well, we better put in some better procedures so that he can't dominate the group like this anymore. And I said, he won't be back. And I said, what do you mean? And then next thing you know, the lady emailed me and said, this guy said he's never coming back. So that's what happens when you start getting good at this. And I've done this multiple times in multiple freedom organizations. They get bogged down by a narcissist who's seeking the spotlight, and I run that SOB out. And again, there's a lady who does this same thing. I read about her. So what do you think? Is this crazy stuff?
Well, I think that the spotlight idea, that I can see how that can work.
That's right. And did you make any parallels to the trucker convoy in Ottawa? Anybody? No? Well, I can explain it. When the trucker convoy went to Ottawa and they were behaving so nice and so friendly and so calm and so adult and so mature that the spotlight was swung away from those reptiles in Parliament Hill, and the spotlight was on the truckers for weeks.
Yeah.
They lost their minds.
Yeah.
All those weapons that they had, like freezing bank accounts and bringing in military, pretending to be police, and all these other things that they did to them, and horses, those were all weapons that were supposed to be held hidden until the last moment when it was too late. The truckers swung the spotlight off of them, introduced blood in the water, and the narcissists just lost their freaking minds and lost all of their inhibitions, they have no wisdom, but they behave like idiots, and they expose themselves to the public, and their behavior swept around the whole world. They destroyed their credibility. Everything that I did on the personal level is exactly how it works on the global level.
Yeah, that's true. Exactly, spot on. Yeah.
So I'm trying to give you guys courage to take it upon yourselves to try this. If you want to really criticize yourself, say that if you stand by while a 3-year-old in an adult's body, a pathological narcissist, bullies people, you're not an adult yet. Use that to motivate yourself to do it. Because I can tell you, you'll never be proud of yourself when you go in there and you knock them 10 for 6.
Yeah.
Any last questions, anybody? We can do this again if you like it. We can start breaking down individual techniques, stories, but remember, This is just not an information session. This is a skills session. And if you're joining in here, it means you are determined that you're going to learn these skills and apply them and become successful at them.
Well, I really appreciate your talk this evening, Mark.
Super.
Yeah, so you're going to have a recording of this that we can post like under your description or something like that?
Yeah, this records a file, so I'll just figure out how to upload it one way or another.
Okay, so I'm going to add your description to the descriptions of healers and in the emotional healing group.
Okay.
And this, and I'll also attach this recording, and people will have this as something to start and go forward if they would choose with this.
Fantastic. I hope everybody enjoyed it.
Thank you, Mark.
You're welcome, everybody.
Thank you, Mark.
You're welcome. Okay.
Thank you, Mark. That was a really good start.
Wonderful. Okay, till next time.